Before we begin this video, I have a serious question for you guys, and I promise it's super serious. Have you guys ever had an addiction? Have you guys ever done something over and over and over again and you just can't seem to stop? Well, I'm going through that right now. Right this instant. I cannot stop making BOROS aggro decks. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. There's just something about the decks that I cannot stop making. What can I say? I love going fast and I love going wide, and these decks do exactly that. So if this interests you, please feel free to like and subscribe, and let's just get straight into it. The first deck I have for you is Gut True Soul Zealot. Now, we've covered this deck on the channel before, but this time there's just a little bit of upgrades and side grades that we've made, just a bit of differences since the last time you've seen her. This deck aims to use artifacts and creature token generators to use as fodder for your gut triggers. We use Inspiring Leader as the background so that our 4/1 zombies that come in are actually 6/3 zombies. Now, this is already an insane creature to have turn after turn after turn, and it's honestly just a crazy deck. We have tons of different ways of recurring our token generators, we have consistent ways of drawing cards, and we have ways to make our 6/3 tokens even bigger with effects like Battle Cry, Melee, and just some good old anthems. This deck loves going one combat at a time. This deck loves going really big with your crazy skeletons. We always want to make sure we have something to sacrifice in order to make these tokens, so a lot of our cards either make something on ETB or they consistently turn after turn make either 1 to 2 tokens. We plan on going wide with these big tokens, but sometimes we can generate enough tokens where they can also attack. Something like a Siege Gang Lieutenant is actually pretty crazy in this deck because having 2 really strong goblins on top of having 6/3 zombies is actually busted. Add on something like a Prava of the Steel Legion and it's over for your opponents. Besides that, we just run pretty standard protection spells, removal spells, a couple of board wipes, and we try to get our card draw pretty consistent. The 3 all-stars of this deck would have to be Nayali, Sun's Vanguard, or Blade Historian. These give all of our creatures double strike, which is absolutely busted. Next up would probably have to be Loyal Apprentice. We make sure that every single combat we have something to sacrifice, and for only 2 mana, it's an incredible rate. And lastly is the effect of Bloody Betrayal. The fact that not only does this allow you to get a gut trigger, it also helps you remove any creature on any board. This type of effect gets around indestructible because you're sacrificing the creature. And on top of that, you get a blood token. We also have a Tentative Connection, which is 1 mana because we have a creature with Menace. And it's the same exact effect. Get rid of your opponent's commander, no matter the circumstances. Overall, this deck is pretty good and it's pretty cheap. Our next deck is Kellan, the Fae-Blooded. Now, the reason I like Kellan so much is his consistency. On turn 2, you can always play Birthright Boon, and on turn 3, you can cast your Kellan, which allows for extremely consistent games, game after game after game. Essentially, when you're playing Kellan, you want to equip him with a couple of enchantments and a couple of auras. We don't actually need too many of these in order to get insane value out of him. He himself already gets double strike, and even giving your creatures +3/+0 is already huge. And with something like a Birthright Boon effect, you basically can tutor up whatever your opening hand is missing. Oftentimes, if you're missing, let's say, card draw in your opening hand, you can now tutor for some of that. Let's say you're missing some protection, you can now tutor for something like that. Or if you're missing ramp, you can tutor for it. The tutor just makes your games consistent every single time. On top of that, we have some optional board wipes with X spells and their cost in Martial Coup and White Sun's Twilight. These allow us to clear our board if we choose to, but if not, we still get some soldier tokens or Phyrexian Might tokens. And these are great in a pinch, and I love their flexibility. In terms of key cards for this deck, Audric Lunarch Marshal is actually crazy because Kellan already has double strike on top of what the equipments and enchantments are getting him. All of your creatures are also going to get double strike, which is just really good value. The next card that is extremely valuable in this deck is Sheltered by Ghost. Coming from the new Duskmourn set, this is a removal piece and a protection piece on your Kellan. It's quite great for the rate of 2 mana, and you can always tutor for it. And last but not least is Urabrask's Forge. Now, Even if you have a little board state, Urabrask's Forge is always getting bigger every single turn with a Trample Phyrexian Horror. Add on top of that Kellan's ability, you're getting really huge swings every single turn with these Phyrexian Horrors. And I just thought it was a really great synergy for the deck. This deck is a super cool concept, a combination of going wide plus Voltron, and it's extremely interesting. So I think you should try it out. Our third deck that I have for you today is Anim Pakal. Anim Pakal is very similar to Otharri, except ×2 speed. This deck is all in on the early game, trying to go as fast as possible. I think this is honestly one of the fastest decks I've ever made. That isn't a combo deck, of course. The goal is simple. Make Anim Pakal as big as possible and swing, allowing you to make a ton of colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that give you a ton of value on their ETBs, make your board extremely wide, and just deal a ton of damage to your opponents. Now, this kind of deck is very similar to the plenty of decks that I already really like. Your commander gets big and is surrounded by a bunch of valuable pieces around you. So you're constantly looking for ways to either double the trigger, make Anim Pakal bigger, make your gnomes huge, or double your tokens. You also have some great card draw in this deck, as token creators, attack triggers, go wide triggers, all are ways to draw more and more cards. And since your tokens are so small, something like a Skull Clamp does work in this deck. On top of that, we run a couple of extra combats because why not? It's just another way to trigger a Anim Pakal that many more times. Our three standouts in the deck are all creatures, and they are Cyberman Patrol, making your opponents have to choose between having a super wide board state and just taking 1 to 2 damage, or taking 3 damage after blocking is just an impossible choice and is lose-lose for your opponents. Next is Reckless Fireweaver. Imagine Witty Roastmaster, but 1 less mana, and it cares about artifacts as well. This is just a great card all around and can get double value. And lastly is Guide of Souls. Gain a bunch of life, get a bunch of energy, and make Anim Pakal huge. This card goes absolutely nuts in this deck, and being only 1 mana is really, really valuable. Overall, this deck is just great. I haven't had a hand that hasn't been keepable. The curve on this deck is so low, and every single piece is just gas, gas, gas. I highly recommend trying a deck like this out. And last but not least is Otharri. Now, we've already had a video all about Otharri on this channel before, so I'm just going to go over it pretty quickly, but I've made quite a few changes since then. This deck aims to be maybe a little bit slower than Anim Pakal, but still really, really fast and very, very dangerous. Otharri makes experience counters which are really hard to deal with, and your goal is to attack as much as possible. Ramp up to that Otharri while playing some value pieces in the early game and start swinging with your 2/2 Rebel creature tokens. From there, we play a lot of extra combat spells and protection spells in order to make sure that Otharri can swing every single turn multiple times. We have plenty of ways of buffing up our creatures, plenty of ways of doubling our triggers or getting extra combats, and a lot of protection for Otharri. We need to make sure that the bird stays around. Now, in most cases, the goal is basically to stick an Otharri and swing as much as possible while not really spending mana on your turn, and instead holding up protection for when those removal spells inevitably come. Some of the key cards in a deck like this are Grateful Apparition, which allow you to get even more experience counters every time. Agate Instigator is also really good due to its flexibility. You can either have an Impact Tremors or you can have a Perforos. It's really up to you. And last but not least is Enlightened Tutor. Now, of course, a tutor is always going to be super valuable. I don't necessarily mean to put it on a pedestal, but Enlightened Tutor allows you to just have more consistency in each of your games. Are you lacking card draw? Go tutor up the One Ring. Are you lacking ramp? Go get yourself a Smothering Tithe. Are you trying to win the game as soon as possible? Go tutor up a Breath of Fury and have infinite combats. Overall, this deck is really powerful, and I totally recommend you making yourself your own Otharri deck. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me. I really enjoy this archetype, and I'm thinking about making some more decks in this category. Possibly Winota, but no one can really tell. Going wide is definitely something that I really enjoy doing. I love going fast as well. I have a deck that does this kind of strategy in Arena, and in most other card games, this is kind of what I like to do also. There's just something about having a really big board state, having a huge army, and just swinging at your opponents. It's honestly really fun and satisfying in my opinion. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And also, I have an announcement. I have finally started up a Patreon. For just a couple dollars a month, you can get some bonus perks, a bonus video every single week, and depending on the tier you sign up for, you can recommend your own deck text that you'd like to see from me. If this interests you, feel free to check the link in the description below, and if not, no worries. Besides that, I want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.